Friends, welcome to another episode of Theology Applied. I'm here with my friend and Professor Brian Laughlin. Professor Laughlin,
Chris,
thank you.
glad to be here, sir.
Yeah. Brother, I don't know if you remember this, but we met in Manhattan in 2016 at a conference.
Wow, yeah.
You were leading the conference along with some others.
Yeah, I remember that.
Do you?
Feels like a while ago now.
It was a while ago.
Yeah. It's great.
Anyway, I remember that's the
I
first
knew
time
it'd been
we
a
met.
while. I mean, we've been longtime friends, so I'm thankful to sit down and didn't realize that was the moment though.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then, and you started along with some other brothers, the seminary here in 20, or 19 rather.
Yeah, 19 at launch,
And then,
first class 20.
Yeah, and I got to join you all in 21. It's been a joy.
Oh, well, I'm glad you're built up. Yeah, the Lord's done a great work, so very, very thankful to be a part, for sure. Yeah.
So what I'm hoping we could do is I want to hear your story of coming to faith. You have a unique story. Dad was a pastor, and I've probably taken 10 of your classes by now, but you've told
There's weird versions of it.
There's all these bits and pieces, but I'd love to hear it as a whole.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. It was a mixed bag. Actually, it was my grandfather who was a pastor.
Oh, is that right?
So my dad was a mixed bag preacher's kid. He was, kind of grew up around church. So I got a lot of good Bible from him, and then a lot of mixed bag church life and all types of other influences, you might say.
Was your grandfather in your life at all, or no?
Well, he passed when I was 4.
Okay.
So I got vicarious. I actually have a bag back in my office of like his sermon manuscripts and like a lot of his Bibles he used to preach out, that sort of thing. So I got secondary vicarious influence through my dad. My dad loved Christ, but he was all over the board a lot. So when I was young, I grew up in church. Kind of all things good Protestant, Baptist, a little Presbyterian flair, that sort of thing, here and there, that sort of thing. And then my parents got divorced when I was roughly about 8, around 8. That was kind of the end of church life, outside of friends that would invite me here and there, and then, on custody weekends with my pops, I'd go.
So he kept going?
Well, no. That's what I'm saying. It was more like guilt going. Seasons would be a little rough. Hey, we need to go to church for this season. Yeah. Things are good. Let's not go. I didn't get to it. I don't know about this church anymore. I had hopped around a little bit when we did or whatever. So, it was Assemblies of God, like I said, Methodist here and there, Church of God, non-denom, Presbyterians, Baptists. I think I got a good eclectic mix of everything good and everything terrible, all at once. So I really was not that much in church outside of getting invited to camps. And I was thinking about, I still grew up 80s and 90s. So at least in the surrounding Richmond area, a lot of, South Side kind of working class suburbs, that sort of thing. Folks are still, a lot of folks are still churchgoers. So all my friends are going to different camps, and they're always very attractional. So, and, they had to reach out to lost kids, try to get them out, so I would go and just have a good time. And then I would get saved every year at camp, of course. But
I remember.
Then I fell away from grace. Yeah, so I've made a lot of decisions. Been in the tank twice to make sure it took, when I was 13, and when I came to faith in my early 20s. So all the way through, basically from like 8 on, it was a mixed bag, but pretty much outside of church. Went to college at VCU, did engineering right here in Richmond.
What year was that, you remember?
Late 90s. Late 90s, wrapped up early 2000. So worked in that field. My father was he was like I said, a preacher's kid. He was also a professional musician for about 10 years.
What did he play?
He played a 5-string fretless bass in a funk band out of Nashville.
Nice.
In the 70s. He said I wrecked his music career.
Is that right?
Yeah. So
couldn't travel.
Yeah, I never got over it. It was a lot for a kid to bear, to be honest.
Can imagine.
But no, he jumped into construction and did construction, residential, commercial building, like any kind of working class family-owned business. I started working when I was 5.
Oh, he owned the business?
Yeah, wow. Yeah. So he was kind of a serial entrepreneur, business owner. That all of that was kind of circumstantial in how it came about, because anybody that would say, hey, do you guys do this? Sure we do. In fact, we have a whole company that does that.
That's right.
And, as we're, crafting behind the scenes, it was started. So that was just kind of it. But I was on the job at 5 years old.
Wow. What were you doing?
I got paid $5 a day to pick up roof and nails for, that was the early, I was competent, 5 years old, roof and nails. They went in a box. The roofers would teach me vocabulary and throw roof, bits of shingles at me. It was like a game. They're trying to hit me with it and hit me with nails. I mean,
safe.
I thought it was magic. I mean, no kid I knew had $5 after working
a
10-hour day. I mean, it was 50 cents an hour. And so, yeah, there's no child labor laws, at least in Virginia, if it's a family-owned business. So it's just kind of what it is. So
you learned a work ethic very young.
Very young, yeah. You just kind of, it's very much an apprenticeship type thing, which has flowed into ministry in a lot of ways. Okay. So you kind of in the truck alongside, watching, observing, being told what to do, figuring it out, taking responsibility. So by the time I was 12, I was pretty strongly part-time, full-time, different seasons.
Wow. Doing construction.
Doing construction. I loved it because actually, I love my dad. My mom's absolutely wonderful. I mean, I'm thankful for both of them. Yeah. I had a lot of time with my dad because basically, if I was going to spend time with him, it was going to be on the job.
Because he was working a lot.
He was a workaholic. My dad worked. No exaggeration. 80 to 100-hour weeks was normal. So before he passed 8 years ago. So you can't start smoking at 11, 12, 13. Pack 2 a day, catches up. So he went down in 3 weeks back in 16, which kind of he kind of knew what he was doing. But anyway, so he even in his last 3 weeks he was still walking around his office with his morphine pump, like still trying to do. I was like, hey, it's probably time to hang it up, bro. But he just didn't know. He just didn't know any different.
Didn't know a different path. No. Work.
Yeah, so I mean, 12 to 15-hour days were normal. I remember I got like a normal job in college, and after like a 8-hour shift, they said, "Well, see you guys tomorrow." I thought, "This what?" I mean, I had my whole life back. I didn't know that this. I had to get a second job just to fill time. So I it was that was constant. So I went into engineering school basically to come alongside work my father's business. Okay. Work from ground up. Was partner in the business by that point all the way through college. Did engineering, which flowed into construction, that sort of thing. Okay. And through that, I had a good friend of mine in engineering school came to faith. And I was a cultural Christian at the time. Okay. I mean, if you had asked me,
I'm a Christian.
I would have said it. You probably wouldn't have seen any of it. Definitely not. So I remember he came and said, "Hey, I became a Christian this weekend." And him and his girlfriend at the time, they've been married many years now. We're still good friends.
Nice.
He said, "Yeah, I became a Christian." I said, "That's great, man. That's wonderful. I've been a Christian a long time myself. It's great." I said, "Well, where are we partying this weekend?" And he said, "No." And that hit me. I also said, "Come on, not that type of Christian, not like a real Christian," And that kind of pushed on me, of course.
Right.
And then
it's convicting a little bit.
Yeah. So through that, Lord worked. My brother came to faith at the same time. My brother's like 3 years younger. Okay. But he's a deep lover, loves Christ, but he's also a massive man. I know I'm not small, but he dwarfs me. And
like 6'5".
Yeah, he was. I'm 6'5". He's right around the same height, but he was like easy plus 300 guy, but like grizzly bear strong kind of guy. So he coerced me into the faith. I mean, he came with that strong gospel, and Lord used a lot of.
What did he say to you?
He just started sharing the whole gospel with me, all kinds. I saw the change in his life, saw the change in my friend's life. Lord worked through some other circumstances at the time. I had a girlfriend I was living with at the time, and just trying to figure out life. Her father was a very successful lawyer, businessman, and at the time, it was kind of like, oh, this guy, this would be kind of a exemplary type guy to follow. And I remember she one of the things that the Lord used. I came in one night and she had tried to commit suicide, OD'd. Now, thankfully, the ambulance came. She was able to pull through, but it shook me. I remember her father came to the hospital, and he was there maybe just moments, not that long, under an hour, sitting there. And he said, "Hey, I need to see my daughter. I got to get back to work." And even that, I said, something seems very off, of what's life about. So I'd been kind of happy-go-lucky cultural Christian. Jesus died for these sins. Let me do what I want to do, kind of thing. And so through that, came to faith. There was another strange occurrence. The Lord used a lot of circumstances. Okay. I remember came out, and after one of the classes at VCU, I was sitting on a bench waiting for a ride, pick me up, and there was a strange guy sitting next to me. And like in Richmond, that happens often. And he sparked a conversation. I said, "Hey, my man, you ever seen one of these?" And he showed me this little picture, and I was like, "Oh, I don't have time for this right now." And I said, "No, I haven't seen that." And it was like a typewriter key that was stamped backwards. And I was like, he goes, "Yeah, it's backwards." And I was like, "Okay, cool, bro." And then he goes, "What does Jesus Christ mean to you?"
Dang, what a transition.
It was the best Jesus juke of all time. And I just remember, being taken back by it. And, I answered on the test correctly. I said, "Oh, he's my Lord and Savior." But you can't keep confessing him with a disingenuous heart. He will work that out.
What did the guy say to you?
Then my ride showed up and he disappeared. What was neat about it, after I came to faith over this coming months, like a year and some late. No, I think this was a couple years later. I'd met my wife Paige. We were dating at the time. Went to this like Christian mixer thing up here in Richmond, and I ran into him. And I just went. I mean, I thought he was an angel, because he disappeared. He showed up on a bench. I was like, that he had to. That was him. So maybe he is still an angel. So I haven't seen him, but this other time he was sitting there. I went up to him, just broke down crying, and I said, "You just don't know what you've done, man." I mean,
what did he say?
He just thought it was like a regular day in Christ. He was like, "Yep, isn't the Lord good?" That's what he does. I mean, he'd obviously been sharing his faith for years, and I was like, "Wow, this is magic." So anyway, so came to faith then, got plugged into a Baptist church south of Richmond a little bit. I was kind of one of the only guys in my early 20s single. At the time, you still...
Were you 22, 23? How old were you?
Yeah, about 22, 23. Yeah, about 23.
So you'd say maybe you were born again around 22?
Yeah, somewhere around there, early 20. It's tough to tell because, I confessed Christ early in my life, did get baptized. The Lord knows if it was genuine, but definitely I wasn't necessarily discipled very well, didn't bear much fruit, man. And it kind of, so whether, the Lord knows whether it was just a long season of extreme backsliding or just took a few more times to hear the word for it actually to take root. So got plugged into a Baptist church. Wasn't that many people in their early 20s at the time that were single. You had some young folks who got married, and then you had like a small college thing, but it wasn't that much. So it was, for me, it was kind of wonderful. Most of my friends I kind of lost during that time.
Wow.
Now I had them, but we couldn't really do a lot of the things that we were doing. So I shared the gospel like a brimstone preacher, because that's all I knew. Sat them all down. I said,
"You don't want to go to hell?
We're all going to hell." Well, I'm not, because I trusted Christ, and you need to trust Him. And that, it was like one of those.
Did any believe?
Not immediately. Here's the neat part of the story. I've been in the Richmond area 20 years, pastor in 15, planted a church here. But over the next decade, the Lord worked in many of their lives to come to faith.
That's cool.
And it was beautiful to see.
Did they contact you?
Yeah, we've kept up over the years and seen them come to be Christians, which it's been amazing. So if I could go back in the early years, I wouldn't have been able to do anything different. I still would have shook them down for the gospel, but I'm glad the Lord uses our faith-filled attempts and that sort of thing. So it was a great Baptist church. I was learning, wonderful pastor there, preaching the gospel. Folks loved Christ. And it was kind of a nomadic period for me. So I was just working a lot, and then I would head, being born again, it's like the scales fall off, and the whole world's ahead of you. And I wanted to know what it was all about. So I just finally started reading. I mean, I went into engineering, so I didn't have to study. It's like mathematics. You got to calculate.
So you didn't read growing up?
Not really. No. Working class. I mean, we didn't have books. It wasn't a big book culture where I grew up. So I went to the bookstore and just started reading. Of course, I found myself in the Christian Living section, which is it was a mixed bag of everything. My theology changed every other week, depending on who I read. Sure. And then I would teach it dogmatically. So the Baptist church, within a few months, the Lord provided a great friend who was a youth pastor at the time. He was probably in his late 20s, married, and just kind of like brought me under his wing and started. He became a wonderful friend. He's a great friend. He's a pastor in Memphis today. Nice. And still a dear friend. Talked to him a few weeks ago. And he just started pouring into me. And he said, you ought to start teaching. Just like a few months. I don't even know what in the world I was doing. And it was middle schoolers.
Oh, geez.
Yeah. So middle school boys, 6th through 8th grade. I was so terrified. Like, I mean, at the time, I wouldn't say I hated kids, but I was terrified of them, and
Sure.
I didn't. No. So it was great.
How many?
I don't know. It felt like 1,000, but it was probably like 10, 12 guys.
Okay.
10, 12 dudes. But being able to capture their imagination and also talk about the gospel and get them to love the gospel and learn anything. Oh, it was,
It's a good way to cut your teeth.
Yes, I learned a lot. I was very, very thankful. Yeah. So through that, probably a couple years in, I just wanted to keep learning. It's kind of self-guided and weird, and I had some good input, but it was all over the board.
Sure.
So I went to the pastors. I said, hey, I'd love to just be able to learn more to make sure I'm teaching these middle schoolers well, and they know what's happening. And the pastor said, Lord's leading you to seminary. I said, oh, okay. It seems like a jump.
Just like that.
Just like that. It seems like a jump a little bit. I said, well, I'm kind of thick into a business career and homeowner at this point, and all sorts of other things buried under.
Are you married yet?
Not married yet, no.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, yeah, if he is, he's going to have to move some things. And so I started praying. Like I said, I had full-time job, pretty immersed career at the point. Had a house, and so I did kind of the fleece deal. I said, Lord, look, I'll just put the house up. You got to move all this out the way in order for me to go to seminary, and we'll just see if this is what you want to do. So the house listed on a Friday, 5 o'clock. It was under full contract, 7 o'clock the next morning for everything in the house.
Everything,
sold everything. Was thankful for it. It was wonderful. It was great. It was one of those things where you say, I want to follow the Lord, and then I remember when it came time to close, and I had to turn over my keys and walk away. Walking away from things. It was Lord had to strip a lot of stuff, and I moved back into Mom's.
Wow.
My old bedroom. Lord taught me a lot through that season.
I can imagine.
Sold my car that was I stepped out of kind of a business partnership with my father's company and pretty much full-time career, and then went back to doing heavy construction. So
with him or with a different?
Yeah, as a subcontractor for him. So kind of just went. So I had to get a new vehicle, but I started Southeastern Baptist Theological Seminary in Wake Forest.
It's a good school.
I loved it.
Was Aiken there at the time or no?
Dr. Aiken had just started. So thankful for his ministry and all he's done. But he had just started Paige Patterson in transition. So it was his first kind of semester, I think, as the president there. So as I started there, just working, doing heavy construction, and just reading 24/7.
Yeah.
I was there 5 years, couple degrees. Just trying
What?
So I did the MDiv there, entered into the PhD program,
Okay.
did all the course requirements for that. Through that process, I had a stint where I studied at Green College at Oxford for a while, philosophy of language, weird stuff. So I'm technically I wrapped up what they call ABD PhD, all but dissertation. So did all the coursework, finished my oral comps, submitted my prospectus. Fast forward, at the time I had 3 jobs, planting a church, trying to evangelize everybody in Richmond. Married by that time, 5 years. Had one baby, one on the way, and something had to give.
Yep.
And so I cashed that one out for another THM.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have 2 masters.
Yes. Yep.
Wow.
Yeah. So I was thankful for my time. Learned a whole bunch. One of the things through the journey, it was kind of an accidental pastor or planner. I went down to just teach Sunday school, and through that journey, the Lord opened up. I was back and forth to this house out of Richmond for over 5 years. So basically, be residential down there during the week. Came back to the church I was at, teaching Sunday school, learning, working construction. Lord opened up for us to teach young adults. It was pretty amazing. I just wanted to reach a lot of folks that were my age, and that opened up. Talked with the pastor. I said, "Yeah, do it. See what happens." So my wife and I were very excited. It was a Baptist church, so we had some large rolls, and we were going to figure out where everybody was. So it was roughly about 200 people, 18 to 30, on the rolls.
Wow.
Yeah. So we contacted everybody. We were going to start this summer Bible study on Thursday nights, because that's when we get back from Wake Forest. And then it would morph into like a Sunday school class on the weekends.
Okay.
Called everybody. Someone moved, but we contacted,
Wow.
150 people. I just thought, this is about to be a revival. It's magic. We get there the first night of the Thursday night Bible study, and one young man shows up.
Out of 200.
One young man shows up. I was overjoyed. This is what I was just excited to tell anybody. I talked with him for 3 hours how the Pentateuch was messianic.
Because you were in seminary.
That's all I knew. I was like, everybody has to see this. Somehow, by God's grace, he sat through it all.
Wow.
And I said, hey, bro, we're going to do this every Thursday. Me and you, it's going to be magic. And he by God's grace, came back.
Wow.
Lord ended up leading, bringing him to faith. He started reaching out to his friends. Lord ended up growing it. All types of people started coming out. And through a couple of years of that, Lord bringing all these types of pieces together, met with the pastors and talked with them about possibly church planting. Kind of came into the conversation about church planting and gospel centrality.
What year was this roughly?
This is about 07.
Okay.
Around there. And they said, we'd love to support you. And they were very supportive, ordained myself, Professor Ponder, who planted with me.
Wow, so he was with you. Did he come into
Day
this
one.
Bible study? Or no?
Yes, okay, he came to the Bible study, yes. So you probably have to get him on the camera for a longer.
He's told his story, but
Has
he
he?
didn't elaborate on, he did say Laughlin, he basically told us what you said, which is what are you doing with your life, man?
Yeah.
And he was playing video games and eating pizza all night.
Oh, yes, okay, yes, yeah. Yeah, I have the redeemed side of it, version of it. I love Doug. Doug's one of my favorite, he's one of my best friends, period. Overwhelmed by him. But he came on a Thursday night. He grew up in church, and obviously Doug is extremely intellectually gifted. And the environment was kind of, I think, amongst many things, a little bit anti-intellectual unintentionally. Okay. And so it wasn't really jazzing him for Christ, because the boy has a big brain. And so he kind of somehow washed into that Thursday night Bible study. I just remember him kind of sitting there, and he was at a point in life of not really loving Christ, not doing well in his walk with Christ. I was basically running hot for Christ at the time, so I was, getting in his face about it in a good way. And of course, Doug, we ended up being great sparring partners, and just kind of nerded out massively.
Nice.
My wife grew up with Doug, loves Doug, but even Doug. So Doug and I were just, he would come to Southeastern, and we would just stay up almost all night long, just talking. Endless hours. My wife would eventually just say, this is just absurd, because just nobody shuts up. It's too much. So anyway, it was Lord brought him into my life, and brought us together, and ended up planting the church out of that. So
it's amazing.
Yeah, the pastor said, we don't know what to do, but we'll support you, pray for you, ordain you, and see what's happening. And they allowed us to build a core team out, which
Wow.
So about 25 of us relocated city center proper about around 2009.
Okay. And that was the start of Remnant.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
So
And you guys were in the Anglican, well, now it's Anglican.
Yeah.
Messianic
Jewish synagogue about 2 blocks from here. Yeah. I was overwhelmed. It was funny because there was another wonderful friend of mine who had planted 2 years earlier. We kicked off a good friendship, and I was asking around like, "Hey, we need a spot to gather." And when he was being honest, he's like, "Yeah, I'll show you this synagogue." But he also thought, like, 1, they're not going to like it, and 2, it's trash. So, he wasn't trying to directly sabotage, but it was kind of like, this would be terrible. And then when I walked in, I thought, this is the providence of the Lord. It was their terrible basement. They had all types of like murals, like Jewish Wailing Wall murals on the back. They had steel chairs. There was nothing attractional about the place, but it taught us a lot about God. God's the one who grows His church. Yeah. And we hung up a vinyl sign outside, and would invite folks out. I remember one couple I still remember. We'd done a lot of, Lord had kind of opened up opportunity to share the gospel with them, invite them out. They're finally coming. It was a young family. And I was standing on the curb. You had to go down these steps behind the steel door that dumps you in the fellowship hall, because we weren't allowed at the time into the Holy of Holies of the fellowship hall.
Room.
Yeah, we're the court of the Gentiles in the basement, which I was thankful for. And the couple pulled up, and they looked at me. I was like, hey, come on, this is it. You guys can park wherever. And they looked at the vinyl sign. They looked at me, looked at the vinyl sign, and just. just peeled off and never came back. They ghosted me, before ghosting was a thing.
Oh, man.
So yeah. But Lord's been overwhelmingly faithful.
Praise God.
Yeah, thankful. So it's been a good 15. But the roots of the church go back, probably closer to 20 years at this point.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I heard you say within the last couple of days that you somewhere in there taught philosophy for 10 years. Where was that?
Yeah. Well, my love for philosophy comes the outgrowth of just growing in Christ.
Okay.
So when I came to faith, I just wanted to know why should I believe these things? Why should I build my life on it? So I really just kind of fell into apologetics.
Okay.
So I went into seminary with, kind of like, with the concentration in apologetics, philosophy of religion, then that went into my doctoral work and that sort of thing in philosophy. So I always was heavily steeped, but a lot of it was so that I might understand better the gospel from the scriptures. And so out of that, a good friend of mine, who's now the president of New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary, Jamie Dew, he was 2 or 3 years ahead of me, and we were under the same major professor, Dr. Bruce Little, at Southeastern. So I was overwhelmed for his friendship. We were going through at the time, Liberty University was converting its DLP program, distance learning program, and bringing on professors to full Liberty Online. And so Lord opened up opportunity for me to teach philosophy there.
Wow.
Did that through their online program for about 10 years.
Wow.
Yeah. And
Now, was this Christian philosophy, or was this Western philosophy and Christian implications?
A little bit of everything. Yeah, general history of Western ideas, worldview classes, evidence classes. So with Christian philosophy, but of course it's all influenced. From general philosophy.
Are you a evidentialist? Are you presuppositionalist?
Yeah, I'll say yes.
Okay, whatever works.
Yeah. I mean, after reading a lot of that for a long time, I mean, the Christian faith is utterly reasonable. Not according to the reason of man a lot of times, but it is absolutely in accordance with how God's made us to love Him with all our mind, and it makes sense, and it's reasonable, adds up, and is never disappointed. So, but there's a lot of choppy waters in just generic history of human ideas and philosophy that can be extreme pitfalls.
Oh, for sure.
So, yeah, if philosophy is not brought strongly under theology and under the scriptures as a handmaid, then things can go poorly.
Yeah, I heard, I like R.C. Sproul a lot, and he's a Pittsburgh guy.
That's right, yeah. Yeah, I'm presuppositional.
Are you?
Sure,
Okay.
sure.
Yeah.
And evidential. Yeah. And abductive, or whatever you want to call it. Right, yeah, sure.
Sproul said, because he was a philosophy teacher in secular university as well, and he made the statement that he saw brilliant students in mathematics and all these other disciplines, and he said they come into philosophy and it's utter failure.
Yeah.
And he said because it's such a different way of thinking and it's a different way of processing reality, and it's quite abstract.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that, or how would you nuance that?
I mean, I don't want to disagree with Dr. Sproul.
You can.
Well, I'll do it adjacently. Okay. From my own experience, I mean, I was an engineer by trade. I went through engineering school, mathematics, physics, all the rest of it tended to come pretty naturally. So when I came into the faith, started studying a lot of apologetics, philosophy, it seemed to me to have a lot of correlation.
Okay.
Because, of course, in mathematics and engineering, it's basically us discovering how God's natural law baked into all things.
Sure.
So it's the same thing when philosophy rightly understood helps kind of us clarify our minds and understand God's world and how He's made it. So it should make sense, should be logical. There should be a fittedness to it.
Agreed.
And so a lot of it, I didn't, kind of came easy. Now, I think if I had tried to journey my way to Christ through philosophy, it's really just one degree of darkness to the next and the next in confusion. Man's wisdom and the philosophies of men do not bring about salvation, nor does it bring greater degrees of light, but darkness. Yeah. But on the other side of Christ, I think you're actually able to differentiate between those things that correlate with who God is and how He's made His world and what's in accordance with His Word, and then also leave the bad. So that's been my experience through.
You told a story. I took your philosophy class. It was very good. And you told a story about going to a guy's house who was this brilliant philosopher. Do you remember that story you told?
Quite possibly. Remind me.
And he had long
a terrible
hair,
memory, though.
And he had all these books. You said he was just surrounded by books. You remember that?
Quite possibly. Keep going. Yes. Tell me about it. Yes. Yeah.
And you said that you were astounded that here's this guy who's this brilliant philosopher, all these degrees or whatever, and he's surrounded by books, and he was utterly lost and confused.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're not able in our own wisdom to know who God is, and much less come to a saving knowledge of who He is. So so you can just get lost forever. This is nothing new. I mean, right. You see Paul encounter it in Acts 17. He goes into Athens. All the philosophers, they love talking. They love new ideas. There's a new book published. It's a New York Times bestseller. Everybody's reading it. I'm getting a little older now, so the devil really doesn't have anything new to offer up. It's just another reiteration or a new tactic of the same old tricks. So he loves to keep us continually think that we can discover who God is on our own understanding. When in fact what we need is revelation.
Yeah, we can't reason our way to God. No, we need it revealed to us.
So it creates a greater darkness of mind in a lot of ways, if without the light of Christ.
For sure.
Yeah.
How would you say philosophy fits with theology? You mentioned it has to be brought under the lordship of Christ. Yeah.
Well, it's definitely a handmaid to theology. So reason is in complement to revelation, but revelation in God's Word and of course in and through the Scriptures is always primary and ultimate in terms of authority. So our God's made us as reasonable human beings to understand these things. And so therefore it complements that, but also must be brought into subjection to God's Word. It's only when reason takes precedent over revelation do we get things very, very wrong. So the Enlightenment kind of was the endarkenment, as many folks have said. I think
that's good.
I think Carl Trueman said that. I could be wrong though, but
it's good.
I believe he said that. Other folks said that. This is just utterly true. So
you often start your classes with these big ideas that are very simple statements, like God is real.
Yeah.
Jesus is Lord. And then like everything under that, you begin to unpack the complexity, but it's always with that big, simple reality.
Yeah. I think that there should be a beautiful, great, perfectly simple and yet infinitely complex way of understanding who God is in His world. And so the end goal is always so that we might, trust, love, and obey Christ more. We might relish in His goodness for us. So however deep we go into the weeds of various thoughts about different things, if it's not producing greater trust in Christ, love for Him, appreciation, and love for His people, then we're probably not putting it together.
It's like a fruitless endeavor.
Yeah. So I normally try to work very simplistically circular. Here's the real simple idea. It's actually much, much more complex than we think. Let's examine it. And at the end of the day, it's Christ.
We're going back to
we're coming back.
Yeah,
and it all hangs. It makes sense in light of Christ.
That's good. If you don't mind, let's talk quickly about how in the world did Grimke come about? I know you were doing pastoral training. A good friend of yours and mine, Ricky Love, I asked him if he was going to do classes. He's like, I already been through that.
I don't think I love Rick. I don't know if I have anything left to teach him. He's gotten everything I have to offer. So, the great question. Grimke was the Lord bringing a lot of things together, but I think primarily it was just the outflow of us striving to steward what God had entrusted to us. So when we planted the church, we were involved with the Acts 29 network, which was a church planting network of great churches across many denominations, gospel-centered, on mission for Christ, trying to bring the gospel plant churches. And so we were part of that. And we had been planning like 6 months. The guy who was over the Mid-Atlantic region, our area, said, "Hey, you guys seem kind of intelligent. Why don't you lead training for us?" Which was
what year was this?
This was back in '09.
Wow.
Yeah. So of course, it was a little absurd in a lot of ways because we hadn't even planted the church yet in a lot of ways. So we got, we've had many opportunities to just steward doors that God have opened for us in training. Before we even started the church plant, we kind of had we had elders in process before we had parishioners.
Is that right?
Which is kind of absurd. So we did want to make disciples and train up leaders. So we had
started early.
We started early, and then thankfully that kind of dovetailed into it. So we just stepped through that door to help train leaders and church planners. That opened up other opportunities for larger availability to help train pastors and planners that are planting churches. And then a lot of the outgrowth through that, the Lord brought Doug Logan into my life and myself and his life. We kicked off a great friendship. This is well over a decade ago now. And Doug was training leaders in the urban context and in the Northeast. So we were both training folks across all the Northeast together. Then he was training folks across the United States. And so as we continued to say, talk and say, how do we actually meet all these needs? How do we love and serve pastors well? How do we train them up? It just seemed most fitting that we needed a organization that correlated to that. And therefore the seminary was birthed out of that, really just to meet the needs, come alongside pastors, help them grow in their ministries, help planners be well equipped as they plant churches. And so through that, many other folks being involved, it kind of came about back in 19. So, so it has a long genetic history, if you will. It wasn't just a hair.
It was brewing for a long time before it actually came to fruition. Yeah. How long would you say, we got this idea, we got a name, we're gathering professors. How long did that process take before in 19? I remember at a conference you let the cat out of the bag.
Oh,
people were excited.
And sticking the name on it, is kind of one thing, but like I said, it's been kind of working for a long time. Yeah. So, how do we do this better?
Yeah.
And so then we kind of, Doug and I sat down one afternoon and we whiteboarded it out. Doug had been stewing on the name Grimke for a long time. Francis Grimke is just a wonderful namesake, an exemplar of a pastor for over a lifetime, 50 plus years. I honestly at the time didn't know who Francis Grimke was. I was steep Baptist, he was Presbyterian. But at least in a very shallow phonological way, Grimke sounded strong. So I said, I don't even know if that's like a name or just a noun, but I'm digging it. And so we roll with it.
Nice.
And just kind of built it out from there.
And it's been a great benefit to me personally.
Wow.
And I can tell you enjoy it. I'm sure these weeks are hard, because it's thing after thing after thing. But.
It's a blessing. I'm very, very thankful to be a part, and all good work in the Lord should be tiring, but it's wonderful.
It's a good way to say it.
I had an old Greek professor years ago, David Allen Black, who says, you want to fall asleep good tired, and that's the case.
That's good.
So
that's really good. It's funny. Yesterday, you started class out with you said this is a Baconian. How'd you say it?
No, I don't know.
And
this is the tragedy of studying too much philosophy.
Yeah, you said this is good. This is a Baconian system or something like that. And then I've heard you quote Bacon so many times.
Yeah.
Where reading makes a fool man, conference makes a ready man, writing makes an exact man.
Right. Yeah.
And before you said that, I always used to think, I wonder if that's how he structures his class, because we read a lot, then we come to class, we talk about it, and then we write.
Yeah.
And you said it yesterday, and I was like, okay, I see what you're doing.
It kind of dovetails and complements our model. I mean, we really want folks to be in context, serving in ministry. That's the place in which they're going to work out all the things they're learning, and that's the place in which they mature well. But you just can't do that well without reading a lot. We just have to. You're not going to understand a lot if you don't have a lot to pull from. So reading is kind of baked in, of course, God's Word, but also all the great pastors, teachers, theologians throughout history that help us understand it. Then that's where we find wisdom, and therefore it has to be something where you just pour over. Yeah. So you have to get full before you can get clear and exact. And then, of course, conference like this, it has to be something that you talk out. Discipleship is something that is a verbal thing. We don't just write one another letters. You have to actually share the good news, talk about the good news, preach, teach the good news, and then writing brings about clarity to the things that we've been talking about and been reading about.
Yeah.
So
you said one time, I think it was you, if you can't write it clearly, then it's not clear to you. Does that sound like something you would have said?
That sounds like something I would say. Yeah, it sounds pretty
so
clear.
True.
Yeah. And the big idea is it doesn't matter if other people are clear. The books that you read are clear. God's called you to love and serve other people, build them up, pastor in your church, and so you actually have to be clear yourself in order to help other people see Christ clearly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You and I both agree with what I'm about to say here, but I think it might be helpful to unpack. Even though you might have the big categories, the big language, the complexity, when giving it to church members and people we're discipling, we want to make theology simple and clear without boiling it down to nothing, right?
Yep.
How would you say that a different way?
Yeah. Simple and clear doesn't exclude richness. Or you might say something that's simple doesn't mean it's simplistic.
That's a good way to say
it. So it's the same. It's the same thing when we come to Christ. It's very simple when we understand He's Lord and He's died for us to make us a new people. That we're His church and we're called to love neighbors and share the good news with the world. But the richness of all the implications and what that means, we're going to be unpacking and delighting in for all eternity. And so those two are never opposed to one another. So it should be one of those in your preaching and teaching that you're continuing to summarize simply the rich truths that you're laying out, not for the sake of dumbing it down for everyone, but so that you might actually bring everybody up.
Yeah, that's good. That's really good.
Christ condescends and accommodates to us to meet us where we're at, but also doesn't leave us where we're at. He takes us where He leads us and wants us to go, and that's a good thing. So I think as pastors, that's a little bit of the task.
That's good.
Yeah.
Maybe we could end with this. Reading. You said at the very beginning of your Christian walk, you went to the Christian bookstore, found the pop section, and was ingesting all these different guys. And now you read, I'm sure, constantly. How can we, who are making disciples or pastors, or how do we continue to ingest reading, read well, but also do all of the many responsibilities? You got 5 kids, right? 4 kids?
4 kids.
Married. And how do we put all that together? How do we do it all?
Not easily, not easily. I think, as over time, you need to read good, faithful books, faithful men, faithful theologians first, because you need to have a healthy diet and workout routine in terms of your spiritual life and how you think about Christ first. Get your muscle fibers built up, and then you're able to go spar with the weird books. So I wouldn't just recommend a lifestyle of random reading.
Okay.
That tends to land in a random theology, any random thoughts about God.
Yeah.
Armchair theologians kind of thing, which is good when it's good and it's bad when it's bad.
So maybe if I'm hearing you correctly, let's read the Bible, but let's read, I don't know, Augustine, Calvin,
right.
Bavinck. Like who would be the big healthy guys that we would want to read to get clear first before we wade into a Peterson?
Yeah, all those that you mentioned. Okay. I mean, faithful fathers throughout church history, faithful confessions throughout history. And then, of course, you have to be rooted in a faithful church.
Yeah.
So you need to be under a pastor who knows these things, who can actually care for you, recommend books to you, know where you're going, so that they actually can help you and guide you. So it's not a kind of like Western individualist rationalistic process where we just self-select things and then we'll figure it out because ultimately the answer is within us. Ultimately, it's not within us; it's in Christ, and He brings us into His church under qualified, faithful men that help us and guide us along that process.
That's good.
So then it helps ensure that we don't end up just wandering into areas that are not healthy.
Which is very easy to do.
Very easy,
especially if you're isolated.
That's right.
How would you encourage a brother or sister that is we all hear, oh, there's no good churches. I'm sure you've heard this, right?
Right.
And so we're going to do our thing. We're going to collect the teachings we want, the theologians, the podcasts, the books. Like, what's the danger in that?
Yeah, Bonhoeffer's another great recommendation. Everything's with qualification, but his book, his book, Life Together, he mentions in there what he calls the problem of the wish dream. And the wish dream essentially is an idealized version of what church should be instead of what it actually is. And that's a dangerous temptation for us not to realize that the church is a hospital for sinners. That we're sinners saved by grace. Our lives are messy. We're striving by grace for Christ to bring in healing and restoration and newness, and we help one another along the way. So sometimes the great danger is that we think in idealized fashion that everyone should have already arrived, and therefore we actually can't experience the journey, if you put it in those terms. And folks miss out on what Christ wants to do in their own lives, but the church misses out because they actually find themselves never rooted in God's people.
Yeah, wow. Yeah, that's really good. How would you encourage that person? They're reading maybe some big theologians, and they're studying the commentaries, and they're not finding the church. They're finding it wanting. What would you say? Like, how would you encourage that person?
Yeah, well, I think humility is required. A lot of times there are faithful churches that confess the good news of Jesus, uphold the Scriptures, are trying to love one another, and be the hands and feet of Christ to their neighbors. And so God calls all of us to be in those types of churches and get our hands dirty to help build it up. So a lot of times it's more of you have to constantly be on guard against a consumer mentality. So your first thought about church can't be, what are they going to give me? Yeah. How do I come here to serve them? How do I give myself to them and build them up and love them and meet them where they're at and those sorts of things. So a good confessional church that's striving to repent and walk that out and understands the gospel well, that's a great place for anybody to start.
When would you say it is maybe time to pray about finding a different church if you're not finding all that you just said?
Yeah. Well, a couple passing thoughts. One is when they begin to lose the gospel from the Scriptures, then it's time to go because they've walked away from the good news of Christ, and so that it's not something where you had a sermon you didn't like. Right. This is talking about proper confessional orthodoxy in terms of the gospel. But so that will be one once they walk away from a right doctrine, but also sustained hypocritical practice. Not right practice over a long period of time of just stagnation, hypocrisy, unrepentance, worldliness. Then that also is a church that's wandered, and it's quite possibly time to reconsider fellowship at that point.
Brother, I appreciate this.
Chris, thankful for your time. Hopefully it was helpful today. Very thankful.
Yeah, love it. Anything else you want to add? Any encouragement to the watchers here?
No, I'm just thankful to be here and thankful for the opportunity to share. So,
thanks, brother.
Yep. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah.